Hey everybody, this is Alex Big Blue, and this is my top 10 X-Men. So I'm going to show you guys my top 10 favorite X-Men characters, and I'm going to rank them for you guys here, and explain a little bit about why I feel that way about each character. But before I get into that, I have to say, as a lot of you already know, the X-Men are my favorite comic book team in general, across the board, and I think they pretty much always have been. Certainly always one of the titles of books I like to read the most is Uncanny X-Men, and is X-Men and, all the other ones as well. So, yeah, they have always been characters I liked a lot, so suffice to say this was incredibly hard to come up with, even in comparison to some of the other My Top 10s. So this was really fun. I got down to 20 characters that I like quite a lot, and then it kind of got a little bit tough at 16 for quite a while because there's 16 different ones that I really love as characters and like a lot. So it was very interesting to try to whittle that down to 10, and it got extremely hard around the 10 to 12 range, especially. So without further ado, let's go ahead and show you guys who number 10 winded up being. At number 10, Shadowcat. So Shadowcat, or Kitty Pryde, of course, is her other name. She is one of the most, like, kind of relatable characters, I think, that's ever been in the X-Men on, like, a human level. And I think she's a really just kind of cool and interesting person because she's very expressive in all of her opinions. And also, I think she brings, like, the kind of young type of thing to the team to mix in with all of the kind of grizzled veterans a little bit, especially early on in her years in the comics. And I also think, whether it be later on when she starts having a relationship with Colossus, I think that's kind of a pretty good character moment, or whether it be just her kind of getting a little bit more capable as we go along as herself. And then, of course, her very awesome powers in general, which is super helpful for a team or for herself, where she's able to walk through walls and phase through anything and anything like that. It's very unique power in general, and very cool that she has that as well. And I just really think she brings a different aspect to the team and is a really cool character in her own right. At number 9, Colossus. I think Colossus's look is very unique, whether it be his red and yellow costume or his, of course, silver skin. Very awesome how that looks. And his powers are just really cool and really great for that type of thing that he does, where he is kind of the powerhouse and he needs to, take a lot of beating and dish out a lot, and he can do both of those things in spades. His physical abilities and durability is off the charts, of course. Yeah, very strong, powerful character that really helps out the X-Men in general. And I think he's just a super likable guy as well. And I think his personality is very cool, and I think he's one of the most likable ones in general for that reason. And I think that, especially, but mixed with his powers and iconic look, really makes him a great character. At number 8, Jean Grey. I think Jean Grey, with her telepathic powers and her telekinetic powers, is one of the most interesting characters for any team. And of course, is iconic on the X-Men team as a member as well, being one of the OGs of the original squad. And I think her relationship with Cyclops is one of the better romances, in my opinion, in comics. I really think it's always fascinating. The two of them in general as characters have always really crossed well, I think. And in any form or in any story she's in, I always find her fascinating. And I generally always find her pretty likable. Her powers are obviously really cool and really awesome. Her different various costumes are always pretty unique for that matter, and pretty interesting in their own right. And I think that she is just one of those characters that is very intelligent and kind of brings that type of stuff to the team more than some of the others, maybe. And I think her as a person is usually always good, even though she's plagued by, of course, like the Dark Phoenix and different horrible things. Mr. Sinister always trying to attack her and clone her and everything like that. I think she tries to be a good person, even though she has these haunting things that she's always dealing with. And I find her as a very likable character in general, honestly, just across the board. And of course, with the Phoenix powers, when it's not going Dark Phoenix, she's one of the more powerful characters and super interesting on that as well. And yeah, I just find her really interesting, and I've always liked the character a lot. At number 7, Havoc. Havoc is a character that I started to like a lot more after I read Mutant X. It is basically a spin off that goes for, I think, 33 issues or something like that. From the X-Men, because something happens in the Uncanny X-Men, which I guess I won't spoil here, but basically, so he gets sucked into this other dimension, more or less, and he pretty much has his own uh, team of X-Men in that he has to lead. They're called the Six in that story. And yeah, anyways, just in general, I love that story. The first, or so much of it that I've read so far, at least. I think I've read through the first arc and then a few other ones. But he's just really likable in that run and very interesting. It really made me like the character a lot more. And also, I read a lot of him in Marvel Comics Presents. He has a bunch of different stories in that. And yeah, through all of that and reading him, I've really begun to like the character a lot more. And he's risen up the ranks a lot, as you can see here, as he made it all the way to number 7. And yeah, I'll be really happy to see him in any X-Men books going forward and just to see more about the character. But I really like him just in general. His personality, his powers are cool, and I just think he seems like a really good hero type, but also like a real person at the same time. At number 6, Phantom X. I think Phantom X just exudes coolness, honestly. He is a very interesting character that has kind of elements, a little bit of like Gambit, Deadpool, and Wolverine sort of all mixed in. And in general, I just think he has a very cool look. His costume's awesome. His personality is pretty funny and interesting as well. He's a really kind of wacky and different character, while also still being very serious in a way, which is, like I said, it kind of reminds me of uh, Deadpool in some regards, and also of Wolverine. And yeah, his origin's interesting. Just pretty much everything about the character is really cool, and I think it's different. And I really like him a lot since he showed up in that Astonishing X-Men. It's the fourth run of that. And yeah, I really love that series anyways, but Phantom X was a big part of that reason why. And ever since then, I've really liked the character just a ton and find him super interesting and think overall he has a lot of cool stuff about him that definitely makes him one of my favorite top 10 X-Men, and not only top 10, but number 6. At number 5, Nightcrawler. So Nightcrawler, I think, is very unique in the fact that one of the things that makes me like about him a lot is his very kind-hearted and caring personality. I find that very different from most characters in comics, and in a good way, of course, because when you're the heroes, it's kind of nice to have a couple of people like that, to really care about what happens to humanity and mutants alike, especially in for a mutant and all that kind of stuff in the X-Men. So yeah, anyways, I've always found that very cool about him, as well as the fact I've always appreciated the fact that he is a religious character that believes, in religion. I think it's might be might be Catholicism, sort of, or else kind of sort of like Christian at times. What he says, at least in the '90s animated series, is kind of seemed like a mix of both, almost a little bit. But nonetheless, I really respect the fact that they let him do that and have a religious point of view, because I don't feel like a lot of characters does, and that's very interesting to me that is a part of his character so much. Even though I know they only mentioned it kind of during certain runs and stuff, more or less, but still, I find that very cool and very interesting. And as far as Nightcrawler as a character, I really like his look. It's one of the most unique probably there is. Honestly, like just great, and it's kind of like a great counterbalance to how his character is, because being a really good person and all that stuff. And then meanwhile, while looking kind of like the caricature of a blue version of the devil, essentially, I think it's a really good kind of yin and yang looking aspect to his character. That's always been very interesting. And also, besides that, his powers of teleporting is just very useful for the team and for him as a character, both offensively and especially defensively, as well as bringing something different to the table where they can, as the X-Men, can get different places where they otherwise couldn't. So yeah, Nightcrawler's just always been really cool, and I've always liked him my whole life, and I find him myself ranking him even much higher now than I did even before. And at number 4, my favorite woman character of the X-Men, Rogue. I think Rogue's powers is very cool, kind of almost well, I guess sort of like a vampire in a little bit of a way, even though she doesn't bite anybody to do it. But where if she touches anybody, she essentially can drain their life and or at least a lot of their energy. And she also gains powers if it's like a mutant or a superhero or something like that. So I've always found that very interesting just on itself. Also, the fact that she can't make skin to skin contact with anybody in any way, even so much as like, kissing somebody or holding hands or shaking hands or anything like that. That's always made her a very empathetic character to me and probably to everybody for that matter. It's, to think that that's never a thing that she can do is very, kind of crazy if you had to deal with that all the time. And I also like when she got Miss Marvel's powers, or Captain Marvel as you know her now, maybe. When she got like her powers and she got super powerful. And I like that version of Rogue when she has those powers. It's always set her apart a lot because she's super strong, can fly, fast, all that stuff as well. And I think that makes her a super invaluable member to the team. And I also like the character's look and the fact that I think it's cool that she's also like a character from the South, which is a little different. They don't have a ton of those all the time. But yeah, she's definitely one of the most interesting ones to me, and I've always really liked the character. And at number three, Wolverine. So Wolverine, of course, being the most popular X-Men by far, I'm sure, because he's everywhere in every comic basically, and for good reason though. I definitely understand that. I've always loved Wolverine, or for the most part, I have. Sometimes he's kind of a jerk at times. Like I get it, if you're a detractor from him, but generally speaking, when he's done right, he's essentially like a monster with a heart of gold to some extent. He's always meaning to do well while also finding himself kind of cursed with his powers of essentially almost immortality, where he basically lives forever, can survive almost anything to some extent. Um, so yeah, he's super different for that reason. His backstory is unbelievably interesting. And I also think the fact that he has, of course, the adamantium put into him during the Weapon X storyline or backstory, however you look at that. And then, of course, with the big claws is crazy. The big adamantium claws has always been a very cool visual and a very awesome power. Even though I know it in and of itself is not a power, but whether it be his bone claws originally or that, or just his other powers like his healing factor and all that stuff, Wolverine just has one of the coolest overall power sets and looks as a character. And I think he also has a very interesting personality, like I said, as well. But yeah, he's just a great character, and I've always really liked him a lot. At number two, Gambit. I think Gambit, in my opinion, is one of the overall just coolest characters as far as his look, abilities, his personality, and the way he acts, and just kind of all of that stuff about him really goes together well for that, I think. And in general, also, I think he's a very likable character. And his backstory is pretty interesting with the thieves versus the assassins. That's always a very interesting thing about his backstory. And the fact that he is, of course, from Louisiana and he has a Cajun accent, that's kind of always a cool touch whenever he's talking in the comics as well, or on the 90s animated series for that matter. But yeah, I've just always really liked that character a lot. And he's always been one of my favorites. And he's second only to one, which you're getting ready to find out now by a very close margin, by the way. And at number one, Cyclops. I find Cyclops a very fascinating character because, for one, just starting off, his personality is pretty crazy because he is a good guy who's trying to do what's right, and he makes decisions and gets behind him like completely. Even though sometimes I believe he's wrong, probably in the decisions he makes. It's very interesting though because that's his character traits. He makes quick decisions and he goes into it one way or another. But I respect the fact that he tries to do that and tries to do what he can. And I think he's a great leader for the team and a great leader in general for that matter. And a very cool character because obviously the fact that he shoots lasers out of his eyes is one of the coolest powers always, anyways, in my opinion. But unlike Superman, he can't turn it off. So essentially, he's cursed with this, with never being able to open up his eyes and look at even Jean, the woman he loves, without worrying about killing her with lasers, which is a super heavy thing to have to deal with all the time. So yeah, he of course has to wear the visors or the sunglasses that's specially made for that all the time. And like I said, I just think he's a really cool character. I also think his any of his X-Men outfits are really cool, also, as are most of the other X-Men characters for that matter. But yeah, I especially like the '90s look. Is probably my favorite one. But the old school one's pretty cool too. And yeah, just in general, Cyclops is always a really likable character to me, and a very interesting one certainly. And I think his dynamic with Jean once again is one of my favorite things in the X-Men comics. And I also just find every choice he makes to always be interesting because I don't exactly ever know what he's going to do until you see it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Alex Big Blue. See you later.